Today we celebrate the most beloved saint in the world and the least imitated. That's what it says in our book of saints, holy women, holy men. And I would have to agree with them from my own perspective. Francesco's transformation into a lover of God, into a lover of God's creation, and into a lover of people, including loving himself, began when he was most vulnerable. The most vulnerable he had ever been in his life. Most of you know the story. Francis grew up in a wealthy family. His father was a cloth merchant. And Francis had developed a high degree of certainty about his life and was determined to even have more certainty over his life. And perhaps that certainty would be that I am certainly not going to follow my father in his footsteps of being a cloth merchant. So in all of the certainty for Francis, there was something missing. So Francis and his comrades decide they're going to be soldiers. Certainty is the opposite of vulnerability. Vulnerability is the place where we grow from being challenged and conflicted. Certainty, really, if you think about it, it's really all about us, all about me, all about the individual. Certainty, as you've heard me say, is a relationship killer. Certainty is all about being right all the time. Well, in this void created by Francis' certainty, he was certain he was going to make his mark on the earth. He was going to be a decorated soldier. He was going to be important in his way. And he was going to fulfill all his desires. Especially the desire, I think, of most of us at some point in our lives, the desire of having more than enough in all aspects of our lives. Well, you know, you've heard this, we make plans and you hear God laugh. Francis was taken prisoner in his first battle and kept prisoner for over a year, and he got really sick. The fall of his ego, his super ego, the fall of his certainty was actually the beginning of Francis's life. From calamity, or what we think is calamitous, for Francesco came from calamity, came his vulnerability, which allowed him to begin his journey of transformation into a life of faith, a deep, deep faith. We heard from the prophet Jeremiah today, a reading, a sign for the feast of St. Francis. And we hear of King Jehoiakim, a king that wanted to have more than he ever needed, way more. He was put on the throne by the Egyptians. He is stealing from his people. He's stealing their wages. He's making them work for nothing. he's having to pay tribute to the Egyptians. And it coming out of his pocket. So he put a heavy, heavy burden on his people. All the while, building for himself, by forced labor, fine and palatial homes, playing games while others suffer. Jehoiakim is not protecting the stranger, the weak, and the marginalized in his kingdom. And it is quite evident from the prophets that these are the things that God requires of us. When you say you love God, if you are not doing any of these things, or if you are actively opposing these things, I believe there's an issue with God of whether you love God or not. Jeremiah clearly said that Jehoiakim knew not God. And today we hear Prophet Jeremiah pronouncing judgment against Jehoiakim. Judgment because the king shows no justice, shows no righteousness in his dealings with his people, and is profiting from their destruction. Now, Jeremiah's pronouncement against Jehoiakim ain't pretty. We stopped at verse 16. Maybe to spare some people. But I think you'll like it, actually. In verse 19, Jeremiah says that Jehoiakim will be buried like a donkey. You know how they buried donkeys? They didn't. They drug them out beyond the gates of Jerusalem, and there their bodies were just left to rot. And Jeremiah says, and no one will care. You gotta love Jeremiah. It's sort of ironic that these two men that we've been talking about, Francis and Jehoiakim, one of their bodies, wealthy guy, king, could have done a lot for his people. Wasn't wanted. That body will not be won. And then the one body, Francis, who became poor for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ, was actually protected by armed guard on his deathbed because they were afraid Francis's body would be stolen by the next village, because they knew Francis was going to be a saint because of all the wonderful work that he did. And they didn't want anyone to steal Francis's body. Now, before Francis died, just a little bit of information. He did embarrass everyone when he asked for one of those sweet almond cookies on his deathbed. I didn't see a problem with it, especially if they could have put chocolate on it. In the gospel assigned for this day, Jesus thanks God that God's ways have been hidden from the wise and intelligent. Now, the wise and the intelligent are not those that have educations. That's not what Jesus is talking about. For Matthew, the gospel writer, the wise and the intelligent are those who are certain of how it is, or at least how it ought to be. Certain that they did everything by themselves and owe no one anything. They're certain of who is worthy and who isn't, of who's in and who isn't in. Certain that some are beyond God's love and deserve to die on death row. Certain that white is better than black. Certain that straight is better than gay. Certain that male is better than female. They are so certain, and their hearts are so distant. They have created God in their own image. And Anne Lamott, I know a number of you read Anne Lamott. I quote this all the time because it just rings true for me. She says, we know we have created God in our own image, when it turns out that God hates everyone that I do. In this certainty, the heart withers and hardens, and the oppressor soon becomes oppressed. In my own experience, being so certain, so right, and manufacturing more certainty from it, it's hard work. It is hard work to be so certain. Because it all centers around oneself. Self-centeredness is not the same as loving oneself. And loving oneself is a healthy place to be. And that is when St. Francis's transformation began, when he learned to love himself. And you heard the beautiful words from the Gospel. Jesus said, come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. We say that almost every week at Conklin. Handing over his burdens, his certainty that he was in control and knew what was best, is what St. Francis did when his plans went awry and in his weakness became more Christ-like. Saints are people. They are not superhumans. They have journeyed and made mistakes and have learned to love the unlovable, which includes themselves. In the eyes of Jeremiah, we can be a bloated donkey corpse or be a follower, knower, and lover of God. The journey to loving self and loving others is ours to make. Amen.
Amen.